Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for attending our July 1st Improving Talk. We are so glad you're here with us today. Before we get started with our webinar, I want to inform you about a feature in the presentation that will make the session a bit more interactive. Please make note of the question mark icon at the upper right of the presentation screen. Clicking the icon will open the question and answer feature, which allows you to send the moderator questions and comments to be delivered to our insightful presenter at the appropriate time. Speaking of insightful presenters, I am proud to present Mark Runyon, who's the Director of Consulting at Improving and has been serving the IT community for over 20 years. Today, Mark will be sharing a webinar titled Getting Started in Public Speaking. The floor is all yours, Mark.
Thank you, Sherwin, and thank you all for joining me for Getting Started in Public Speaking. I know your time is very valuable, so I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me for a professional development talk, one that very close to my heart, something that I feel has really helped me in my career. So just to start off here, a quote from Warren Buffett. It's from an HBO feature of about a year ago. He says, "In my office, you will not see the degree that I got from University of Nebraska. You will not see the master's degree I got from Columbia University, but you will see the award certificate I got from Dale Carnegie course on public speaking." So one of the wealthiest, most powerful business people in America, his call out was public speaking was one of the critical pieces that got him to where he was today. So I think that's a good piece to set the tone. So public speaking is an essential part of every professional skill set. It can open doors for you that might not be there for you otherwise. And it doesn't really come easily for most people. So, and shying away from it can really be a detriment to your career. A study found that a fear of public speaking can cut wages by 10% and inhibit promotion by management by 15%. So a little bit about me before we get started. As Shervin said, my name is Mark Runyon. I am a director of consultant with Improving out of our Atlanta office. I lead a team of 29 at my current client. I am very much involved in thought leadership efforts, whether it be writing, speaking. I regularly write for the InformationWeek as well as the Enterprisers Project. And I have presented at basically everything you can think of, from conferences to user groups to company events. I would say on any given week, I present probably 2 or 3 times. It's just part of my wheelhouse now and something that I've grown comfortable and confident with over time. So my hope is to kind of share my experience and show you what I've learned and hopefully help you achieve some success from your side. So our agenda today, we're going to kind of look at the life cycle of a talk, from that preparation, pulling your content together, making your topic selection, to your pregame. What does that ritual look like? How do you kind of put your game face on and get ready for the main act? The actual delivery of that content, whether it be delivery to your team, delivery to a user group, a conference, whatever form it may take. And then that relief stage of, man, that was a lot of work, but I feel awesome having been on the other side of it and had that accomplishment. So my goal today is really to demystify this process right here and to help you overcome roadblocks, address any concerns you may have along this path, as well as highlight some keys to success along the way. So right out of the box, there are 1,000 reasons why you can't do this. And that little voice in the back of your head is probably going pretty strong, saying things like people who talk at, say, conferences or user groups, those are like Microsoft MVPs or people who write technical books. That's not me. To counter that, I'm not a Microsoft MVP. I really have no desire to be. I'm not that technically focused. I'm not a technical savant. I do write, but it's more because I love writing and I want to get my voice out there more so than I'm some Buddha on a mountaintop, if you will, preaching the good word. I'm just like you. There's no credential that gets stuck on you to say that you are good enough to talk at this thing. We all have something to say. We all have something to share. You may be telling yourself, I don't have anything interesting to say. You could be telling yourself, the thought of standing in front of a room of people scares me senseless. Yeah, I get that. A lot of people have that fear. You could be saying, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? I'm going to look like an idiot. Yeah, that's a real thing. That's a real fear as well. So we're going to cover all of these these areas here today during our time. So first and foremost, we need to ask who our audience is. Are they there by their own free will? I'm not implying here that you're chaining your audience down to their chairs, but there are certain situations that are more free will than others. So say you're going to a conference talk, there's 4 sessions during that hour. Somebody's opting in to be in your session. They want to find out more about your topic. They want to explore that with you. Versus say that office meeting, maybe it's a planning session you're having, those grueling all-day planning sessions that the entire department has to be a part of. Nobody really wants to be a part of it. They bribe you with lunch, but at the end of the day, you're not necessarily there by your own free will. So based on the answers to these 2 questions, we're going to kind of prepare differently based on where we're at. So, and there's a few different audiences we're looking at. We could be presenting before our team. This could be a lunch and learn, or so we're presenting to a user group, or maybe even a conference talk. In each one of these, say you're presenting before your team, there's an obligation to be there, obviously, and we need to assess the mood going in. What are we relaying? What's our message? Are we relaying bad news or critical information that might put our team on edge? That's a different emotional state than let's do a knowledge share where we are detailing this bug that we now got out of production that is now making everybody's lives better. Those are 2 very different emotional states, and we need to prepare for that and recognize what might be coming back from us, from our audience, when we relay those different messages. If it's a lunch and learn, it's like your internal group, that's a very forgiving audience. Maybe we don't have to have our message as polished and flawless as we normally would if we're giving, say, an outside audience. But I found there does seem to be that sort of imposter syndrome creeping in at times, where certain people will be like, I can't present in front of my colleagues. They'll recognize all the things that I don't know. And that's not really the truth, but that is a narrative that kind of goes on in the back of our heads. So regardless of which one of these, how this comes out, how you answer these 2 questions, each one of these audiences it's all about communication. We're getting our ideas across. We are trying to influence others, and ultimately, at times, we're trying to give back. We're trying to share that expertise. So if we are giving a talk to our client to say demo a project that we're getting ready to release, our topic is chosen for us. But if we are kind of submitting to a user group or something like that, we usually have to come up with something from scratch. We got to figure out what that topic's going to be, and that can be daunting for some people. So I work with some of the most brilliant technologists I ever met, and consider myself very fortunate to do so. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the phrase, "I'm not doing anything important." That is simply not true. We all have a story to tell, but you have to be brave enough to tell it, and you have to put your passion behind it. If you do those 2 things, people will listen. So if you're struggling with trying to figure out what that topic selection is going to be, it can be really helpful to sit down and interview yourself. Write down a couple of cool things that you've worked with in the past month. If that window is too short, take it back an entire year and just kind of think through what are some of the things that I was passionate about, that I really got into. What was a problem that I really struggled with and I was really proud to make it to the other side of it? How can we talk about that in a professional context? Also, it can be helpful to kind of think back through your career. What's a tech project that you worked on that you were really proud of? What makes that thing so memorable? What makes it stand out in your mind? And when you're just considering topic selection, a perfect one is try to identify a technology that you've been dying to dive into. Preparing for a talk, it can be an awesome motivator to get you going, to start working in that technology, to explore it. Because if I have to talk and relay my findings to somebody else or a group of people, I'm gonna dig in deep, and I'm gonna try to explore every inch of that thing so that I can speak intelligently about it. So it can be an awesome device to kind of get you started. I worked with a guy who would regularly present his He had created a Bitcoin predictor in Python. It was really cool. But the coolest thing about it was you could tell how passionate he was about that project by listening to him talk about it. He would really get into it, and it kind of made everybody around him kind of want to start exploring that space just because of the passion that he had for it. So that's kind of our goal, is to share that passion, to share that drive that you have for whatever this thing is that you're talking about. And this talk is at the whole about public speaking, but maybe you're wanting to give conference talks at some point in your career. A quick pro tip on that: usually they will give you all the information that you need, as far as, you need to submit by this date. Here's what we're asking from you as far as a title and an abstract, and submit your slide deck and those sort of things. My suggestion is to try to come up with 2 or 3 topics that you would like to submit, because it never fails. Maybe you submit an awesome topic, but maybe there's another speaker that they've already heard before that submits that same topic. So you get overlooked, not because your topic was bad, but simply because they can't have 2 of the same. So by giving them some variability, there's more options that are opened up for them to select your topic versus getting that one that gets left behind. So that's my only call out on the topic selection for conferences. So next we need to tell our story. So whenever we construct a speech, we should be trying to put it in that narrative type format. This quote up, or this stat up here from the Stanford study from Bauer and Clark, found that subjects recalled 6 to 7 times more information, 93% versus 13%, when information was constructed into a narrative. So it really shows you the impact of just how we arrange our story, how we approach it, and what that looks like. So my method for coming at this is, first of all, just to brainstorm. Let's get all of those ideas out of my head, onto paper, onto Notepad, whatever your device may be. There's no structure to it at that point. Let's just get the ideas out. The next step is to add that structure. Let's try to arrange these ideas together. Let's chunk them up. Let's find a logical flow for them. And when we do that, we can start stepping through that story. And if it's choppy, maybe we need to have a transition. Maybe we missed the spot here. We need to fill in some information, or maybe there's a slide there that we weren't considering. It can really help us to understand how that story is getting told and make sure we're telling that complete story from end to end. So next, we need to put all this information together that we have just kind of brainstormed and arranged. Usually this will be a slide deck. And I will say there's a few just kind of ideal things that we should be shooting for when assembling that slide deck. So each slide should look like it's part of a cohesive whole. There shouldn't be all these kind of jumbled elements all about, and you're wondering what the heck is happening with this presentation that I'm watching. It should all logically make sense as it flows through. There shouldn't be any lime green backgrounds with yellow text. Your eyes should never hurt when it looks at a slide. Logical things, but things that I've seen through attending other people's presentations that you really have to call out for whatever reason. So we never want to make our slide look like a ransom letter. We want to have consistent fonts, font faces, font sizes, have muted color schemes that don't really kind of stand out and steal the show. Less is more. We don't want to pack our slides full of content. You don't want your audience sitting there reading your slides as you're talking. You want the focus to be on the topic. You want the focus to be on you. So, and once we run this enough, once we dry run it before we actually present it to our end audience, we should have largely this content memorized. We don't need it on our slides to kind of help direct us. They should just be points to help us continue this conversation, to help us understand where we're at, to not lose our place in the conversation and move it along and advance the story, and setting the expectation for the audience as to where we're going to go and where we're at. When it comes to images and videos, they should be relevant to the audience. They should be relevant to our story. If I am talking with my coworkers, I have a lot more flexibility in that situation. I might throw in a funny meme or a video that's fit for that audience. If I'm giving the same talk to my CTO at my client, no. Everything's going to be professionalism first, to the letter, and there's not going to be anything that detracts from that talk. It's centered on that professionalism. So our slides should always complement our talk and not steal the show. So think of this like an awards ceremony. So our topic is our guest of honor. You are the master of ceremony. Your slides are the decorations. They're the curtains, the columns. Nobody's thinking to themselves, man, those are awesome columns. They're just part of it to accentuate this talk. They're complementing, not overshadowing. And lastly, professionalism is king. Polish is very important, whether it is your slide deck, whether it is your demo. Take the time to really understand what your audience is looking for. Put that extra time into those demos to make sure that they actually work when you're showing off this great thing that you just developed. It can make a world of difference and make your talk versus detracting from easy things that you could have solved beforehand. One note, this deck, as well as many others, is involved, I pulled off Graphic River. I think it was like $15. A lot of professional decks. I'm not sitting here hawking their wares, just that I found some really good quality decks out there in the past. So if there's something you're looking for, I definitely check them out. I've probably reused this deck 4 or 5 times, so I've more than got my money's worth out of it. All right, so think back to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Our actor here, Ben Stein, is probably best known for droning on during the roll call, Bueller, Bueller. But to me, his lecture on voodoo economics carries a lot more weight. So let's watch that real quick and see why.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics, voodoo economics.
All right, so this one has a lot more impact for me as what not to do. As you can tell, his voice is lifeless. He has completely lost his audience. We have blank stares across the room. We have a guy sleeping, drooling on his desk. Ben Stein doesn't care, or at least his character doesn't care. He drones on endlessly. He could care less if they're hearing, they're learning, they're doing anything with this topic whatsoever. That kind of takes us into our next thing. Find ways to put humor and your personality into your talk. We don't want to be Ben Stein. Our goal is to connect with our audience, to put them at ease, to make them a part of this conversation. So by your being comfortable in yourself, in your skin, it helps make your audience comfortable. And the easiest way to do this is talk to them like you would talk to a friend. Have intonation in your voice, have a conversational tone. allow that personality to come through in your content. Now, the humor side of this is a little tougher. For some, it takes some thought. There are those people out there who are very quick-witted, and this comes very easily. They can spontaneously deliver laughs. I wish I could do it. I know that I can't. I have to really kind of give it some thought and really be a little bit more deliberate about it. And this could be the importance of delivering your talk to a small group, or at least assessing it in the postmortem to understand if I'm adding humorous elements to it, are these things landing, or are these things, should I probably just kind of leave that thing out? If I take it to a small audience before I take it to the big audience, I can try to test a few things and see what's going to work and see what's not. So that takes us to the importance of the dry run. And I would say if you don't listen to anything else I say today, focus in on this. This, in my mind, is the most important. The thing is we can take all this time in the world preparing our presentation and really getting it to the place that we want it to, but we still have to deliver it. And it rarely comes out of your head the way that you intended it to that first pass. It's usually this chaotic jumble of thoughts that really needs to sort themselves out before it's actually audience ready. There was a study that was done back in the 50s that showed that personal communication was 38% voice, 55% nonverbal communication, and only 7% on your content. So the point of this is to say that it's not only about what you say, but how you say it. So it can be really helpful to, say, record yourself when you're delivering your mock speech, or deliver it in front of a mirror and see what else are you bringing to that talk that you may be unaware of. Maybe you have some personal quirks or some tics or whatever. It's awesome to have that awareness because they may be detracting from your talk. And if you're aware of it going into it, you can counter that. You can keep that from coming through once you're kind of in the moment and have that great awareness. So my recommendation on dry runs is to start early. So run through your talk multiple times, make those small tweaks, and you're going to have these inevitable kinks along the way. Maybe you need to add that extra slide. Maybe this slide doesn't make sense. I need to rework the content on this piece. If you start early enough, you have plenty of time to make those adjustments and make sure it's really ready for that audience. And as we mentioned on the last slide, it can be really helpful to present to a small group and get their feedback so that you can make those tweaks, and it's not all just how you think about the presentation. So I find free pizza is an awesome motivator and incentivizer to getting a small group out to hear your talk. So try that out. And I will say, if fear is a real thing for you, preparation is the #1 tool for calming your nerves. Practice, practice, practice. If you think you've practiced too much, you haven't practiced it again. The more you practice, the smoother it's going to be, the more comfortable with the material you're going to be, and the more confident you're going to be in your talk. All right, story time here. My first conference talk was at Atlantico Camp back in 2019. I thought I had all my ducks in a row going into it. The conference organizer told me to bring an HDMI connector to connect up with the projector. So this was at Kennesaw State, so it's about an hour away from my house. It's on a Saturday morning, so no traffic or anything. So I give myself 2 hours to get there. I arrive at Kennesaw State, right about an hour before the talk. I'm the first session of the day. We started at like 8:30. I get there, I get registered, and I'm like, well, I've got a video in my slide. I want to go to the room and make sure I can hear it through whatever the PA system or whatever it is, so that I know whether to use it or to drop it at the last minute. So I get there, and I'm standing there, and I've got a male HDMI connector staring at another male HDMI connector. I'm like, goodness, this is not good. I've got 45 minutes to figure this out. I'm one of those weirdos with a Mac, so I can't just go outside the room and say, hey, can somebody help me out here and give me a connector? As I said, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, so Best Buy and all these things don't open till 9 o'clock, so that's not an option. The AV guy from Kennesaw State is standing there with me like, dude, I don't know, what are you looking at me for? So I go into problem solving mode. I loaded my slides up on my personal website, so I pull it down to the local computer. I have him install Visual Studio for my demo. I mock up a quick serverless example, install the AWS toolkit, and literally land this thing about 5 minutes before I'm supposed to start, stressed out of my mind. You never want to be in that situation. You want to make sure that you have all these contingencies covered before you ever walk in that room, and you're ready. You know you've got it. You're covered. So figure out what you're going to need. Contact that event organizer, the user group sponsor, whoever it be, and verify the setup. What am I going to need? How do I get connected with whatever this is? If it's a virtual Zoom call, let's test that out beforehand to make sure everything's working. Make sure my Mac's not going to suddenly ask for permissioning things to get me into the room. Imagine those worst possible scenarios as you're going through this. My computer won't turn on. Okay, well, let's bring my backup laptop. The projector doesn't work. Could I whiteboard this thing if I absolutely had to? If you can think through those worst case scenarios, then there's less that can trip you up in the moment and kind of derail your success. You don't need to be stressing over these elements in your kind of pre-game atmosphere ritual. Get there early so you can try out the equipment. You make sure your videos work, whatever that may be. Again, the key is to kind of work out all those contingencies, because if there are technical difficulties that can happen, technical difficulties will happen. We just need to assume that that's a thing, and we need to go in prepared for that. The fear. Public speaking is the #1 fear that people suffer from. To put that in perspective, it outpaces the phobias of spiders, heights, and even death. Jerry Seinfeld had a great little comedy snip saying that this means the average person, if they had to be at a funeral, would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. People, on the whole, 73% of the population are scared senseless of public speaking. This, for some people, this could be the most important piece of the entire conversation, and we could probably build an entire talk around just this. That underlying fear is one of judgment and negative evaluation by others. And we really need to look at what's happening behind that fear. The psychological side of things is it's triggering that fight or flight response. When that anxiety kind of takes over your body, the adrenaline floods into the bloodstream. It's putting your body on high alert. The blood is pumping to the muscles to react, getting you in that fight or flight scenario so you can make that reaction. Your breathing becomes very fast and shallow. So if we look at all of those 3 body elements, there's only really one thing that you can do anything about, that's your breathing. If we control our breathing, we can help control that response. So it can be really helpful to do some breathing exercises. Just inhale through your nose, expanding your abdomen and chest and your eyes, and then hold that for a 5-second count, and then just breathe out. And then just keep repeating that for a few minutes until you feel your body getting back in your control, until you feel yourself calming down. And the best part about this is no one knows you're doing it. I could be standing in front of that room full of people at the conference or in front of the user group, and nobody sees you doing breathing exercises. You're just off by yourself doing your preparations and kind of getting control of yourself, but no one else has any idea of what's going on. Visualization exercises can be really helpful too. We talked about it in the last slide, visualizing those worst case scenarios. How can I counter each one of those so that they don't trip me up in the moment? That fear has no control over me around those areas because I know I've got that. I know I can take that in the moment if it should come up. Also, we need to do positive visualization exercises. Visualize yourself giving a great talk, the audience being engaged, everything coming together perfectly. That's a great exercise to have to see yourself having success and to show yourself that you can do this. You have control over this. Then lastly, if I were a therapist and I was treating you for said phobia, the thing that we would be doing is we would be doing repetition through desensitization therapy to relax that response. So it may seem a little counterintuitive to you, but the more that you do this, the easier this becomes. The fear, the power of that fear gets kind of extracted. It's no longer there. So I have a story on this one as well. So in college, I was deathly afraid of public speaking, to the point where I just avoided it at all costs. I never did it if I could avoid it. I was in a honors fraternity, and the girl I was dating at the time wanted to become the initiate advisor, and she asked me if I would help her. I'm like, sure, why not? What I hadn't considered is I would have to get up in front of the fraternity, like 60 people, every single week as part of the executive board and deliver an update. Oh my gosh, first time I had to do this, I was scared out of my mind. I probably said the phrase "things of this nature" probably 50 times at a 5-minute talk. I was so out of my head, fearful of the situation. But a funny thing happened. By meeting 3, by meeting 4, by meeting 5, the fear wasn't there anymore. It had no grip, it had no control over me, because this is just something I did. I was comfortable in the situation, and I had desensitized myself to that response. There's a really cool quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. She's got many cool quotes, so this is just one, but it really applies to this scenario. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do that thing which you think you cannot do. All right, we want to connect with our audience. We normally lose 90% of our audience within the first 5 minutes. We want to catch our audience early. We want to pull them in and keep them engaged throughout. If this is an in-person talk, my goal, and say that audience is under 25 people, my goal is to make eye contact with every single person in that room during that first 5 minutes. Engage them, pull them in. We never want to read our slides. Again, back to that other slide of not packing them full of content. If we're sitting there looking up at our slides, we are telling our audience that's the important part, not what I'm saying, not the topic, but those slides. You should be reading them. And I'll admit, the first couple times that I gave presentations in a professional context, I leaned on those slides like a crutch. Like, don't pay attention to me. Go look up there. Let's take some focus off of me, because I'm really not completely comfortable in this moment yet. I get it. It makes sense. But again, that relays something to your audience, that there's where the focus is, and not on me, not on my topic. We want to try to incorporate interesting and relevant stories. These help lighten the mood. They drive your point home, but they should always fit the natural flow of your presentation. They should always, again, be relevant. So this presentation right here, we've heard 2 stories so far. We heard the college speaking story, and we also heard the technical difficulties story. Both of those were to drive points home around fears of speaking and technical difficulties. They help that content resonate a little bit more. They help bring it home of this could actually happen in this scenario. They really help tell your story. Also, we want to make our presentations as interactive as possible. This is easier with certain content, certain audiences more so than others. This is difficult to do it. I feel very detached from you right now. I can't see your faces. I can't see if this content is landing. But when you have the ability to make it interactive, it's an awesome way to pull your audience back in if you're losing them by asking them questions. It can really help to drive home important points as well. So if you ever do feel you're really kind of losing your audience, it can be helpful to let's take a step back here. Let's break up into groups of 2 and ask them to answer a question. Survey the room for their answers, and then tell them what the correct answer is. So we really want to make our audience a part of the conversation, a part of this presentation. It's a lot harder for you to drift off and start thinking about what's for lunch and forgetting what this presenter is talking about if I'm continually pulling you back in, if I'm continually making you part of this conversation and an active part of my presentation. So next, pacing. When we talk about pacing, we're not talking about wearing that hole in the carpet. we're talking about making your talk fit in the time that you have allotted. We have roughly an hour here today. We want to try to land this thing probably about 15 minutes. So we really need to think through the pacing of that and make sure that we land it at 50 after and not 30 after. Nobody wants to do a 30-minute Q&A session. That's not good for you. That's not good for me. So we really need to think through how this pacing works. So first off, we want to try to eliminate the junk words in our language, sometimes where the fear gets through, or where we want to try to fill those gaps and those silences. The ums, the so, all right. These are all pause words. Don't be afraid to take those pauses. They have a real place in the conversation, in your talks. They serve that important purpose and add that extra layer of professionalism to your talk. As I throw one in there. So when you're preparing and you're giving a talk, say at home, you could deliver that talk perfectly, and you get in the moment and you race through it and you deliver it in 30 minutes. That's the nerves. That's where it's coming in. That's where it's kind of taking over and taking control. But you never want your words tripping over themselves. You want to have a nice, even dialogue. You want to have a nice, even conversation. Taking those pauses. A water bottle can be an awesome source to remind yourself, after the slide, I'm going to take a drink, and I'm going to let that last thought sink in for a second before I start taking on the next topic. And the reverse can be true too. I've heard this from other presenters in the past, that they do engaging interaction with their audience really well, and they get their audience talking and going, but the problem is they can't gauge for that when they do a dry run at home. That hour-long talk is now threatening to go an hour and 10, hour and 20 because of the engagement they've gotten with their audience. That's an awesome problem to have. I wish we all could have that problem. In those type of situations, if you find yourself in that scenario, it can be really helpful to have optional content kind of placed throughout your presentation. It's like, well, let me see where we're at when we hit the halfway point. Maybe I'll hit the slide, or maybe I won't have time for it. Maybe I need to keep on going to the next one. That can really help with your pacing and make sure you're where you need to be based off the audience feedback and what's happening in the moment. And if you're giving a highly interactive talk and you're more of a stream of consciousness type person and you just like to go, it can be really hard to judge your time and where you're at. So it can be helpful to maybe take a little bit more scripted approach when you're designing that talk, when you're putting it together. All right, I said we would discuss this one as well. The fear of somebody asking me a question that I don't know the answer to. You know, you're thinking to yourself, I spent a lot of time and effort preparing this content for you over here. Why are you asking me about this stuff? That wasn't part of that wasn't part of the what I signed up for. I get it. But the problem is your audience is going to ask what they're going to ask. So you can't really control that. The fear that comes in here is that imposter syndrome. This is where you doubt your accomplishments and your talents, and you have this internal fear of being exposed as a fraud. And we really need to shift our thinking around questions. Questions are really valuable. They can show us where we have areas in our presentation that weren't as well developed as we thought they were. They can help us deliver this presentation stronger in the future and get in, really strengthen this content before that next audience might see it. So in these situations, myself, if I get hit with that question that I don't know the answer to, I simply say, hey, thank you for your question. Unfortunately, this isn't something that I've run across before. I would love to connect with you offline to discuss this topic more. So look at what we did there. We validated that person's question. We confirmed that's a great thing. We also admitted, hey, I don't know everything, and your audience doesn't expect you to know everything. That's okay. But you're also setting the expectation that I want to talk to you about this more. This was a valuable contribution. I would like to take this conversation offline and let's continue having it. So right there, we should have solidified a valid response to our audience member, and it's okay that we didn't have the answer to this particular question. And I will tell you, back to our preparation, back to our dry run, the more you prepare, the fewer questions are going to get by you at presentation time. And whatever you do, do not BS your way through it. It undercuts your authority, and it really knocks your credibility, because inevitably somebody's going to call you out that that's not right. You are giving bad information, and we don't want that. We don't want to take this great talk that we've spent a lot of time and effort putting together, delivering in a good way, only to have it tarnished by something that was so preventable, something we didn't even have to add that. Just admit, this isn't something I've worked with. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you afterwards on this. All right, so up until this point, it's been a lot of preparation, a lot of work, a lot of dry runs, and no doubt when you're in the moment, it's probably a little bit nerve-wracking, but at the end of the day, you've hit that finish line, and strangely, it's a lot of fun. You know, that fight or flight response is still going in your body, so that adrenaline rush is still there. After my first conference talk, I felt like I could leap tall buildings with a single bound. I felt awesome. I was driving home that day thinking, I need to go find my next conference to submit to. I felt that awesome about it. It's a great accomplishment, and really speaks to your abilities, and speaks to just getting up there and making your voice heard and putting yourself out there. That's challenging. Don't think otherwise. So it's a valuable thing, and you should feel good about it. And as Eleanor Roosevelt told us, we have looked fear in the face. We did something we thought we could not do, and it makes yourself stronger. You have this awesome accomplishment to be proud of. So we don't want to stop there. We don't want to hit the finish line and just be like, man, that was a lot of work. I'm done. Maybe I'll never have to think about this again. We want to try to build on that. We want to help make this presentation stronger. We want to help make ourselves be better speakers. So we want to try to always do a postmortem. Let's call it, say, 12 hours after that talk, whatever that talk may be. Our goal here is to try to catalog our successes and learn from our mistakes. So asking ourselves questions like, what went right or wrong in this presentation? Where could I have improved it? Did I get questions? Are they something I can integrate into this talk should I have to get in the future? Did I get audience feedback? Was that feedback actionable? Is that something that I can use to improve as a speaker or as improve this talk? So my goal is always try to find, let's call it, two things in any talk that I give, be it the talk itself or things that I could have done better as a speaker. And if I do that over time, then I will have stronger presentations. I will be a better speaker, and I will gain that confidence, that comfort that comes with being a better speaker. So around this issue of feedback, I struggled with this early in my speaking days. It's like, why did I only get 1 or 2 feedbacks from that talk that I gave? I know there's like 30 people in the audience. Did they not like it? What happened? It's really easy, actually. All you have to do is ask. At the end of your talk, to say, hey, I would appreciate it if you take 2 minutes out of your day to help me become a better speaker, for this topic to get more traction with my future audience. Just give me a small measure of feedback. Overnight, my feedback went up 3 times just by having that one little piece, that one little mention at the end of my presentation to call out, hey, can you help me out? This is really valuable to me, and I would really appreciate it. So, as we said, this can be really valuable to helping you become a more polished, more confident speaker. So, a real quick mention on virtual versus in person. So, on the virtual side, it's a real mixed bag, and we brought this up earlier. One of my goals for myself professionally was to become a better speaker at the beginning of 2020, that was my goal over the next year, is to talk at more user groups, talk at more conferences, and to really get comfortable and confident within the space. As you can imagine, life had other plans. COVID comes in and hits, and I'm thinking to myself, as conferences start canceling across the board, this goal I have for myself is not going to happen this year. But an interesting thing happened of, yeah, a bunch canceled, but then all of a sudden, all these ones started cropping up, becoming virtual. So I'm in the Atlanta area. I probably have a chance to speak at 2 to 4 conferences a year, let's say. If I don't travel outside my metro area. When things went virtual, I probably spoke at 12 different conferences in 2020. It gave me a lot more opportunity to be in front of a lot of different audiences. So that was really cool that I had that opportunity that wasn't there before COVID. And it was cool to also be on the docket with all these other voices. So you'd have a speaker from India, one from Europe, and there's a lot of value gained in seeing those different perspectives. The bad is what we already discussed. I can't see your faces. I can't tell if this content is connecting with you. Is it falling flat? Are you engaged? I can't pull you into this conversation as easily. That's a really tough thing to sacrifice. And given if everything was even, I would much rather be in front of an audience than virtually in front of an audience, because that is a tough thing to give up. But there's a lot to be said for this too. I don't have to leave my home. I don't have to travel across town. I can talk to an audience that isn't local to me. So there's a lot to be said for getting that message to that wider audience. So that wraps us up. Per our pacing, we aim to deliver 10 minutes before, and there's where we landed. So I will make this slide deck available on my Twitter feed after this. ASP Programmer is how you can locate me. I have given, let's call it 5 resources here. I wrote an article for Business to Community right after that first time I spoke about 8 things that I learned from that experience. So it's kind of a nice little time capsule to show where I started. And if you haven't done a lot of speaking, it could be there's some interesting tips. I've included a few in this presentation, but it's worth reading. Breathing exercises. If you want to try to manage your anxiety, there's a good article on that. I told you where to get this deck, which was Graphic River. Again, not plugging them, but just giving you a resource if you choose to take it. All the images that came in throughout this were free stock images. So Unsplash is an awesome resource for finding great images for free. The only call out I always make is put an image credit within your slide deck to that photographer. It's the least you can do for them doing all that hard work to get you that. And then finally, I gave this talk, gosh, it's probably been a couple of years ago at Houston Tech Fest. So I've included a link to that in case you wanted to go back and look at it after today. So I will leave you with that to kind of wrap up here. The thing is, you're not going to be Tony Robbins your first time out of the box. You're going to make mistakes. Your talk may only be slightly better than good, and that's okay. With preparation and practice, your first speaking engagement can be a tremendous success. That doesn't mean you're going to receive standing ovations. People aren't going to be lined up to get your autograph, but success is really measured by you showing up, by you facing your fears and giving the best talk that you're capable of. And if you do that, you'll really thank yourself afterwards. So thank you. I'll open it up to questions if we haven't.
Thank you all for attending today's Improving Talk. And Mark, thank you for sharing getting started in public speaking. The recording of this session will be available the next business day. To view the recording, locate the session from Improving's virtual events page. As a reminder, all of our virtual lunch and learns are recorded and shared for your convenience. Thank you and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.